Hello, friends. Welcome to the Science Show, and very good morning. And we are live across all social media. And in the Science Show, if you are watching our live streams daily, you must be knowing that we bring very interesting subject. And today, we have a very thought-provoking subject that we want to discuss and pick your mind as well, so you can actually get associated with this discussion. And there is no time limit. I mean, you can take your time, ask any questions, observations, whatever thoughts you have about this subject. And the subject is, how are we going to grow our food while in space? And you know that the space flight has been the forte nowadays, especially because the next frontier is out of the Earth. We have to probably go and establish ourselves on the moon, set up a base there, and from there go to Mars and set up a base there, and from there spread into the solar system. That is what the destiny lies for humans. But then how this is going to happen? Because so far we have been known to have eaten food. I mean, the astronauts who have gone to space through a tube or through a pre-packaged material, because there is a limit to how much food you can carry from the Earth. And if there are no supplies sent to the space station, the astronauts and cosmonauts will find it very difficult to live in space and survive. So it's a very big question, very profound, and all this technology advancement is good. It is required. We need to have very powerful engines to fire our modules into space, and then we have the mathematics with us, physics, knowledge of physics, to basically put the spacecraft in the right trajectory, and it will take its own path, reach the destination. But then how we will survive the journey? I think that is where everything boils down to, and that is what the topic of discussion, which is, can we grow our plants in space? Because so far all the astronauts have been eating the processed food, either through a tube or for water consumption. They are probably having Gatorades, which is pre-packaged. But then there is a limit to how much water you can carry, and there has to be a lot of recycling technology which is built into the space stations, the ISS, which is doing all of this research. And humans understand the need of plant and to grow the food, because plants will provide the nourishment and the requirement for human body. So ISS astronauts have been growing plants for many years on the ISS. Actually, they are actually trying to see if they can actually create sort of a farm in the space, and what are the implications of these plants. Can they even grow? I mean, the plants naturally grow on Earth, which has all the ingredients in the ground they need. They have there is carbon dioxide, which they use as a power source. There is sunlight, and there is enough gravity. So can we adapt the plants which are which are grown on Earth in this space, and where all of these things are in a very scarcity? So there is no gravity, there is artificial atmosphere, the water is also artificially created, nourishment has to be fed artificially, and sometimes even the light may not be in abundance. So to carry the photosynthesis, there may be a challenge when it comes to growing the plant life in space. And that is what we want to discuss. What are the different R&D that has been done in order to prepare the human future exploration into far off celestial bodies like Moon and Mars. And even if people land on these planets, what they will eat, because if they live on Mars for like a week or so, what are they going to eat for 1 week? It's a big question, and that is why none of these expeditions will start, or the colonization. So when I talk about colonization, it's not the similar colonization that happened in 400 500 years back. It is about setting up human colonies on surface of Mars and surface of Moon. But after these, the first troops land, the exploratory engineers, scientists land on the surface. What is that they are going to eat is a big question. What is that they are going to drink? So if we are preparing our food, and if we are preparing our technology and doing research on how to grow plants in outer space, then we have a story, a success story, and then we can plan rest of the things around this whole research that the scientists have been doing. All right, so now we know that humans need to eat, and there is no way you can survive without consuming 3-course meal in a day during a span of 24 hours. That is how our bodies are programmed while on Earth. Now we are sending the Earthlings strapped into some sort of a chair, and then putting them in a cabin which is very small, and then sending them in outer space with food supplies for the set number of days. So before they embark on this journey, since they have a need to eat, therefore how much to eat, when to eat, the whole regime or regimentation of that whole process is actually part of the training. Very, 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 very important. So when the astronauts are prepared for space flight, they undergo years and years of training, at least 10 to 15 years of living in that way. So, also getting trained about how to survive in the harsh environment of zero gravity with low air pressure, and how much you have to exercise. And so over a period of time, the astronauts and cosmonauts basically start following this regime which is regimented on them, and when they go to space, their bodies start demanding based on the regime they have been put through. So you and I, a normal person, if you want to basically take a space flight, you just cannot go there. One fine day you wake up and then say, okay, fine, I'll go. You can probably spend a day or maybe few hours and come back, but not like the professional astronauts who actually live there for few months or few weeks, a longer stay in space. For that you need very rigorous training and also a regime, how much food you will intake and after what duration. So it is a completely regimented routine, and the very fact is that humans need to eat, and therefore growing your farms in space is very, very critical. Now there are a lot of requirement, as I mentioned, that once you land on a outer space planet like Moon or Mars, you need to have a food grown on the surface, so that your colony or your engineers who are actually doing work, setting up the habitat or preparing for next flight, making fuel, all kinds of activities will be required. Some people will be required to do sanitation, some people will be required to do exploration, some people will be required to do construction. So all kinds of activity which similar to what we do on Earth will be carried out on these various surfaces, either on Moon or Mars. And all of these different people who have who have lived there will have to eat food. As I said, humans need to eat food. So that is why it is important to understand how to grow plants in zero gravity, and also how to adapt plant to these various celestial bodies like Moon and Mars. Now I have a observation from a viewer. The viewer has joined from YouTube. Edify Learning is the name of the channel, and now they are saying that time has come to do crucial success stories to establish on food, especially on different planets, as we are planning to colonize other planets. And very good. I think Edify Learning, you're actually hitting the nail on the head, and that is what the topic of discussion is. Yeah? Because I think that is the Achilles heel. If you don't have food available, then the whole mission going to Mars is a non-starter, because what they're going to eat during that journey. All right, so and after landing on Mars also, they need to have a food supply, and since humans need to eat, you need to grow. I think that is where the whole point is of today's discussion. And well, on the ISS, as I mentioned earlier, scientists have been doing farming experiments for number of years, and they have found various species which can be tailored to survive in space, given the set conditions. So all kinds of conditions are being tried on these different species of plants, which are essentially the uh, earth grown plants. But then we are trying to see how they adapt to zero gravity and the harsh environment of the space. On the face of it, zero gravity looks very, when we look at the TV and, you're floating around without any effort, no energy being spent, and it looks like that you're flying like Superman. But in reality, the zero gravity creates lot of exertion for the person, for any sort of life, including plants. The internal cell structure gets stretched because of zero gravity, because the cells essentially evolved on Earth in the high gravity environment, and then you suddenly remove the gravity, it creates a sort of a stress, and it also changes how cells of these living organisms will absorb various nutrients which are required for the successful life of a cell. So this is something which requires a much more deeper study and more genetic adaptation of these plants in a zero gravity environment. And because of that, there are certain plants which cannot survive. The scientists have been doing a lot of research, trying different species to grow food for the astronauts when they are traveling to far off distances and also living on those planets. So some of the species cannot survive, and some have shown sign of adapting to the zero gravity and low nutrient environment. Now, what happens here is that the plants actually undergo naturally the natural selection, and they try to change their habits to adapt to zero gravity. And this is very, very important, because I think we need to understand this very closely, that how plants are changing their genetic structure to suit the new environment in order to survive. If we actually understand this fact clearly, then we will be able to make those genetically engineered species which can survive in different kinds of environment. For instance, if we actually grow certain crop on a continent, how today we are very successful in adapting that crop to grow in a different continent, because a genetic engineering process, I mean, this was done in 70s and 60s, many decades back. So for example, a lot of experiments were done using rice species. There are certain rice which are grown in certain part of the world, but it has been adapted to grow in a different continent to basically solve the food problem, food crisis. And so this has been successfully done. So if we know that these are the processes which changes genetically in the plant, then we can bring those plants back to Earth, and then we can actually do research and find out what are the genes which are getting deleted and what are the genes which are getting added because of the space environment naturally by the plants. And then we can follow these processes in doing our research, so that we can create different kinds of plants to survive in zero gravity. That means the plants will help humans when they are transiting from one planet to other. They will carry their farms, and these plants will actually grow and supply food during the transit. And there could be other species, the seeds of these species can be carried to grow on Mars, on Moon. So there are different kind of genetic engineering we can do to prepare food supply of humans when they land, so the food can start growing as soon as they land on these surfaces. Based on the research on the International Space Station, we have found that these genetic changes are being done naturally by plants, and these plants have been brought back, and scientists have been trying to analyze these genetic changes so that these genetic changes can be streamlined, sort of benchmarked, and can be implemented in different species. In addition to this, there are instances where certain plants are not relying on the process of photosynthesis, because at many places the sunlight may not be available, or too much sunlight may be available in space, and it's very difficult to control that. You would need extra energy to provide optimum environment to the plant. So some of the plants are shifting to another process which exists in nature called radiosynthesis, which essentially similar process like photosynthesis, taking the sunlight, using carbon dioxide and converting carbon into food, etc., etc., all that as part of the photosynthesis. But in the radiosynthesis, instead of the visible light, the plants are using the radiation. And friends, if you have little knowledge of your school science, we already know that the radiation is omnipresent. We are always bathed in all kinds of radiation which is coming from space, and space will have less of sunlight but very high amount of radiation. In fact, the space suits and the spacecrafts are actually shielded to prevent radiation reaching the humans. So there are plants which are adapting to radiosynthesis so that they can actually survive even in total darkness. And since radiation is omnipresent, all kinds of radiations are there, so the plants can actually use a similar process, use the radiation to convert their food into usable food. So that is as far as the plants are concerned. So all this is part of the study which is being done in order to prepare future human flights. Understanding this is also going to help back on Earth, because there are certain areas on Earth where nothing grows. For example, for instance, Antarctica and all that. So using this research which is being done in space, if we are able to understand what are the genetic changes which are required in order to grow the plants in a very harsh environment yet provide food for humans, then we can actually start growing the plants which are genetically engineered for Antarctica. So this study is not going to help only in the space exploration but also back on Earth. It will help humans to grow more, to convert infertile land into fertile land and have plants growing in harsh environment. All kinds of species can develop genetically, which will then solve the food crisis on the planet Earth. And also this is very important because we have recently touched 8 billion people, and the way the calculation of the population explosion is calculated is about doubling. So the next doubling, which means 16 billion, will happen very soon, in less than a decade, that has been predicted. So the current resources availability that we have on the planet Earth cannot sustain more than 12 billion people. So this kind of research will help us generate more food for future population, because population is going to double in any case. And if we are able to do this research, bring it back to Earth, then we can actually have more resilient plants growing in harsh areas like desert and cold areas, and those cold desert or hot deserts can be converted into field which will grow food for future generations of human. And it will also help us send our people in outer space onto different planets and help resolve our food crisis or food requirement which can help our growth into outer space, starting with solar system. So friends, this is something which is going on right now, very, very important. While we are mesmerized by the news of Artemis, sending us moon pictures, and so much research being done on Mars, and the new missions being planned for Europa, and Saturn missions are being planned, really high-tech spacecrafts being planned to go. But then if humans are not going and settling on those those satellites, then we are actually not solving any issue. So I think this is the Achilles heel, where we learn how to grow food in different kinds of condition, either in zero gravity outer space or on different planets, having different types of conditions, and yet we should be able to engineer the plants to survive on those planets and also in outer space. So friends, thanks for watching, and thanks for Edified Learning for sending that beautiful observation. Thank you for joining us live. If you have any suggestions, any comment, do join us in the live session in the science show, and I will catch you again next time with more intriguing subjects. So as always, thanks for watching, and bye bye.